Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining our virtual Pee Dee Author Expo. We have some great authors that are participating. What they did was we opened it up. We asked authors to submit their excerpts from their book. And I'm glad to say that we had more applications, submissions than ever before. So this is a group of talented authors writing in a variety of genres. Today, our moderator is Richard Moses. Richard is the Chief Community Relations Officer at SC Thrive. He is from Florence. He lives in Florence. He's from Marion. And I want to share a little bit about what he wrote on his Facebook intro. He says, I'm a simple guy who's a family man, a loving husband, lover of God, and a servant leader. And I thought that must really be a good person. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Richard. And I hope you enjoy this as much as we enjoyed reading the author's excerpts and putting this together to share our love of literature with each other. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and thank the Friends of the Florence County Library for putting this on. Without them, a lot of things that our libraries in our county could not do. So we always want to thank the Friends for their support in everything that they do. Thank you for that introduction, Debbie. You're too kind. But what she said in there, that's exactly how I feel about life in general. As I get older, you know, I'm just wanting to go ahead and coast this thing on out and live a peaceful, restful life, enjoying my family, enjoying my friends, and things that I always wanted to do. So with that, what we want to do, we want to go ahead and get started. And our first author is Miss Rebecca Bruff. Miss Bruff is from Amarillo, Texas, and she graduated from both Texas A&M. She graduated with her bachelor's degree in education, and she has a master's and a doctorate in theology from Southern Methodist University. She is an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church, and she serves several Dallas area congregations. One thing that I love about Miss Bruff is that there's a story of Robert Smalls that caught her ire back in 2013. And she was so captivated by Mr. Smalls that she moved cross country to research and write this story. And in 2016, she was determined to tell the story of Mr. Smalls. And in 2017, she was a scholarship recipient for the prestigious Key West Literary Seminar. Trouble in the Water was published in 2019. So without any further delay, I want us to go ahead and hear from Miss Bruff, and I'm going to start asking her a series of questions so we can get to know her and everything about her book a little bit better. Miss Bruff, please tell us a little bit about your most recent book.
Richard, thank you. And I echo your words of gratitude for the Florence County Library System. It's great to bring us all here to talk about books today. So yeah, what you described in the intro is exactly what happened. Until about 5 years ago, I was a Texas girl, and I actually grew up. I was born, my childhood was in the panhandle of West Texas, which, unlike the South Carolina Lowcountry where I live now, is brown and dry. And all of that all of the time. But in 2013, my husband and I visited actually a trip to North Carolina for a graduation. And then we had a few days to visit the Beaufort area, the Low Country, jumped on a carriage tour. And one of the stops on that carriage tour was in front of a bust of a man whose name I'd never heard, Robert Smalls. And the carriage driver told us a little bit of his story, you know, then among many other things that happened on the carriage ride. And so in that hour, I learned that Smalls was born in 1839 here in Beaufort, that when he was just 12 or 14 years old, the family who owned him and his mother and 60 something other persons, the owner hired him out in Charleston, which meant that he was sent to work in Charleston. Of course, his wages went back to the McKee family, who were his owners. And so he had various jobs, but right before the Civil War began, he had been put to work on a cotton steamer called the Planter. And after the war began, that cotton steamer, like so many other boats in the Charleston Harbor, became Confederate gunboats and arms boats. So at that point, he was enslaved on a boat that was keeping him enslaved. And he was part of a crew that was loading it with cannons and ammunition week in and week out. They were running it to various forts. He became very familiar with the Low Country tides and channels. He became familiar with the signals on all the forts. And so about a year after the war began, the dark of night on May 13th, when the Confederate officers left the boat against orders, he and his crewmates under his leadership commandeered the boat. They started up the steam engine. They went from the southern wharf in Charleston Harbor to the northern wharf. They picked up the women and children that they loved and added them to the crew of the boat. And then they began making their way past the various forts. He knew all the signals. He called the signals. They signaled for him to pass. And just before dawn that next morning, they entered into the waters that were barricaded by the Union Navy, pulled up a white bed sheet as a flag of surrender, and delivered the boat to the Union Navy. So he was made captain of that boat on behalf of the Union, served valiantly, really courageously and heroically through the rest of the war. And then when the war was over, he returned here to Beaufort. He bought the house behind which he had been enslaved. All those evacuated homes were available for back taxes. So he bought that house, and he finally got to be in the house instead of behind the house, raised his family there, raised a family of educators. And he was a great champion of literacy. Shortly after he returned to Beaufort, he was elected to local leadership and then to state, and eventually he was a U.S. congressman.
Yeah.
And he did so many extraordinary things. His legacy and contributions are innumerable, but one of the enduring and really significant things that he did was to be part of the authorship of some of the very first legislation for public education. And this was a young man who'd been denied literacy. He was against the law to teach an enslaved person to read or to write, but he became a great champion of literacy. There's so much more about the story, of course, but in that carriage ride, I heard most of that. And I got off the carriage and I went straight to the bookstore and said, where are the stories about this man? And I was disappointed there weren't very many. There are a couple of good biographies. There are a handful of books, but I just couldn't find enough. We flew back to Dallas, where we were living, a few days later. And for 3 years, Robert Smalls just got under my skin. And I was reading about him. I was Googling. I was kind of making notes. And I've always loved reading and writing, but I'd not anticipated writing a book. But at one point, it just became very clear to me that his story deserved to be told. And so I went to my supervising pastor and said, I think I need to take some time off and try to write this man's story. And that was the beginning of an extraordinary journey for me.
Well, tell me the title.
The title is Trouble the Water.
Mhm.
Trouble the Water. And it looks like this. That gorgeous cover is a photo that was actually taken here in the Low Country, and it's Beaufort County. I didn't know that till after the book came out, and someone emailed me and said, I love seeing my photograph on the cover of the book. She had been the photographer that the publishing house had worked with. But the title comes from a hymn that I grew up with, and it comes out of the enslaved African-American tradition. It's called Wade in the Water.
Wade in the Water,
And
yep.
I'm sure many of you are familiar with it.
Yeah, we still sing that, yeah.
I still sing that, and I listened to it all the time when I was writing. It's really gorgeous. And in fact, in the author's notes in the book, there's a link to one of my favorite YouTube presentations of that by Sweet Honey and the Rock. But it's a beautiful hymn, and it really echoes the story of the Israelites being led out of Egypt by Moses, Richard Moses. You know, it's a story of liberation, and the hymn recalls that, and it also alludes to the story in the New Testament of the pool where invalid people waited for an angel to stir the water or trouble the water, and the first one in would be free from the troubles. Mm-hmm. So I love the hymn. I listened to a lot of music while I was writing. And then early on in the process, one of the things I learned is that there was a convention of giving a child what's called a basket name, a nickname, that is representative sort of the circumstances of birth. And we know the historical record tells us that Robert Smalls was born on a night of trouble. There was a hanging that night. And so I gave him that nickname. And so in the book, his basket name, his nickname is Trouble the Water.
Well, tell us, lastly, how can we go and get a copy of your book?
So it's available wherever you find books, you know, on the big sellers online and the big bookstores. But I really hope that people will go to their library or go to their local independent bookstores, because we are so grateful for the work that both of those institutions do. And I'd also want to let people know it's available as an audiobook, because I think Robert Smalls would have wanted the accessibility of that. And the narrator for this is just an extraordinary man. His name is Gerald C. Rivers. He's a voice actor and stage actor in LA. And if you've seen his name, it's probably because he's really renowned for his Martin Luther King Jr. Reenactment speeches. Mm-hmm. He's a Morehouse man, but he never really lived in this part of the country except for college. And about halfway through the narration process, he called me one day and he said, you know, this is a lot more emotional for me than I anticipated. I didn't know the story. And I said, well, Gerald, I didn't know the story either. And that's why we're telling it together. So it's a beautiful audio, and I would definitely want your viewers to know about that.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bruff. Thank you for your contribution.
Thanks so much.
As we move on, our next author is Mr. William Landis. He's been writing in his spare time ever since he was a teenager. What kills me, he doesn't look like he's much more than a teenager right now. So he has some good genes going on. He began writing as a quirky minimalist science fiction poems known as, please correct me if I'm wrong, is it sci-fi?
Yes, sci-fi coup, science fiction haiku.
Yeah. Okay, and having them published in the Sci-Fi Quest. Great. He has been nominated for the Dwarf Star Awards in both 2017 and 2019, and the publication of science fiction poetry collection, The Miseducation of the Androids, published by Hireth Publishing. He has his bachelor's and his master's degree from North Carolina A&T State University. He is formerly a teacher out of Roland North Carolina, and he currently works as an agriculture extension agency, and he also serves in the National Guard. Mr. Landis, tell us a little bit about where the title of your most recent book, Blood Ball, how did you derive that?
Well, the whole concept of Blood Ball was a junior college basketball player in a place called Lumberton, North Carolina, which is 30 miles north of Florence, right over the border. And this young man named Jalil, who's having a hard time getting scholarships, and he stumbles upon a conspiracy or a vampire secret society that, if you know anything about Robeson County, is one of the poorest counties. It is the poorest county in North Carolina. There are a lot of issues. And during the time period this book was written was when Hurricane Matthew hit, and there was a lot of devastation. And, you know, already bad situation was made worse by that natural disaster. And so this whole concept of the book is that a secret society of vampires comes to the county government and says, what we're going to do, we're going to, you know, vampires live hundreds of years. That's how the myth goes. And they, during that time period, you're able to accumulate a lot of money. So we're going to use that money. We're going to give it to the county government to make invest in the community, build housing, affordable housing, community centers, all the good stuff. And in return, you're going to allow us to hunt the people you don't want there. The drug addicts, dealers, pimps, prostitutes, anybody, the least desirable people we call degenerates of society. And it's kind of that moral dilemma that's built around, and the basketball players. So the combination of basketball players and vampires is where the name Blood Ball came from. Okay.
Tell me, how did you get started in that particular genre that you write?
Well, when I was younger, I actually enjoyed reading it. I love the works of Philip K. Dick, you know, The Man in the High Castle, all that good stuff. You think about, then I started exploring the genre quite a bit more. You look at the great Black science fiction, speculative fiction writers, George Schuler, Octavia Butler. And then you look at the history of, there's one anthology on Black speculative fiction. I forgot the name of it, but it was great. I mean, it showed like the background of W.B. Du Bois, the great African-American scholar, whose mission in my book as well, he actually wrote science fiction short story called The Comet. And just kind of seeing that and just kind of see how it all ties in, how it influenced the future and how we think, it kind of made me want to kind of explore some ideas I had in that genre.
Okay. What, anything in particular you're working on right now?
No, really just promoting this, have some other ideas for books. Yeah, well, I wanted to kind of do like a Harry Potter book that's set at HB historically Black college. I thought that was pretty interesting. That was one of my favorite books growing up, Harry Potter, the whole series by J.K. Rowling, and just sitting around thinking, well, gee, you know, what if this was in a Black community? How would that look? And so comparing, tying that in with a rich history of Black, historically Black colleges, I thought would be very interesting.
Is there any particular audience that you're trying to reach in particular?
Well, in this book, I'm not sure if you know anything about the Robeson County area or that area that's 30 miles north of this. There's a large community of Native Americans and African Americans. You look at the statistics, it is one of the few rural areas in North Carolina or the whole Southeast where predominantly minorities, rural areas predominantly not minorities. And before I got there, I never, you know, where I'm from originally, North Central North Carolina, I'd never seen a Native American in my life. And I go down there and you have this rich culture of Lumbee Indians, and they're living with African Americans, and you see there's like this tension there, and there's also, you know, this beautiful culture that comes as a result of that interaction. And I just kind of want to reach out to those people that live in that community or have lived there. And you go see in the chat, I posted my author page. I've also posted a link to the book for you to check out.
How would somebody go about reaching you, whether on social media, website? How would somebody go about getting in touch with you, William?
Well, here's the, let's see, my contact information. Let's see if I can, there it is. And you can also look in the chat and you can see where I put my Facebook page. Click on there, like that, comment on there anytime you would like to. If you want to purchase the book, you can also go to blackgoldpublishing.com and you can find it on there. And you can also go to amazon.com and purchase it on there. It's going to be there within a few weeks. And like I said, the link to purchase it on is in the chat.
So everything is in the chat?
Yes.
How did you come about with the plot for your book? What gave you the inspiration for the plot that you came up with in Blood Ball?
Well, I moved down there, had never heard of a place before in my life. I'd be an agriculture teacher. A friend of mine told me about the job. I went down there on a whim and took it, lived in a hotel for a few weeks where I found a place. And it was just such a unique place and culture. And I'd never been anywhere that flat where there were swamps. I'm from central North Carolina. The Piedmont region are all hills and pine trees. Mm-hmm. I'd never seen a swamp in my life. And then in high school and in college, I majored in natural resources, agriculture, all that other stuff. And one of the things I knew how terrain worked. I asked my class this one day, this place floods a lot, doesn't it? And they said, no, it's never flooded. Well, a couple of months later, Hurricane Matthew hits and the whole place is underwater. I hate to feel that like I talked it into fruition, but it happened. And I'd never been around a flood like that in my life. I remember driving in my truck, the water was up to my lights. And it was just kind of being a part of that, working with the shelter and just kind of seeing how it was happening. And then the devastation afterwards and then how long it took to clean up and how it affected the people, the amount of people that died and how the place was never the same. And then after that, just kind of being around in Lumberton, if you look back around that time, you see these kind of string of murders they were never able to solve in this one area in Lumberton, North Carolina. And it just kind of had me thinking, well, what if I combined these two things together and made a story? And that's how Blood Ball came to be.
Well, great. Looking forward to picking up a copy of your book and reading it. We want to thank you for your contribution as well.
All right,
the next author we will showcase is Mr. I think it was retired Lieutenant Colonel Mr. Henry Grady Weaver III. He's originally from Darlington, South Carolina, and he was also a National Guardsman and became a combat medic in the Darlington unit. He graduated from St. John's High School in 1966, and he attended Shorter University in Rome, Georgia, under a basketball scholarship. That's all right, Mr. Lieutenant Colonel Weaver, basketball.
That was a few years ago.
I hear you. He graduated in 1970 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in history, political science, and received his commission in combat arms following his attendance at the Palmetto Military Academy in 1974. He holds a Master of Science in Human Resource Management from Troy University. He's commanded many National Guard units in Florida and Kentucky, and along with the 360th Civil Affairs Brigade. He retired from Sunoco in 2014, where he worked and held the various positions for 37 years. He is the present past commander of the Darlington American Legion Post 13, and he holds a life membership with the Honorable Order of the Kentucky Colonels, the National Guard Association, the American Legion, and the Military Officers Association of America. Lieutenant Colonel Grady?
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate you joining us today. So tell us a little bit, how did you, what inspired you to write the book, Fire Creeping in the Short Grass? I thought that was a very, very interesting title.
Well, thank you, Richard. My inspiration came from my wife of 50 years. been blessed with 50 years of marriage. And she lost her father at the age of 4, who was a career Marine. And with that, she actually was a co-author of a cookbook back in 2007 in the local area here, Hartsville, Pee Dee area. And with that, it stirred a new idea of really trying to understand who her father was. There were a few pictures, things like that. And so in the cookbook, it was vignettes, pictures, short stories of family members or whatever that had the recipes. And from that, one day I said, let's collect as much information as we can, which we started. Over almost 300 letters, personal letters from my main character, Frank Trimual Wall, my wife's father. And from that, got all of his military records, and in turn went to visit all the major bases he was stationed at, from Parris Island to Camp Lejeune to Quantico, and put all that together. And when I retired in 2014 from Sunoco, I actually walked out the door and began penning my outline and trying to figure out a title, because I knew that one day I was going to have it finalized. It took me 6 years, but it was a lot of visiting locations, a lot of museums, running off on tangents. But the real inspiration came from my wife, and having lost her father at an early age, and he was a career Marine until his death at the age of 32.
Young.
Yes. But it was, I found this man that I never met through the military records. I call it triangulation, where you take all the military records, you take all the letters he had written, his girlfriend and then future spouse, visit all the locations, the museums, do a lot of research, investigate as much as you can. And voila, I found out this individual, my wife's father, was actually a descendant of the Pace family that were found in Jamestown in 1607 as part of that group. I mean, they came over in about 1614, but not there initially. I found out he had relatives that died in the Battle of New Orleans. It just went, and it had during the Revolution, he had a father, a fifth great grandfather, a fourth great grandfather that actually was a loyalist that died at the Yadkin Shallows up in North Carolina in a skirmish with Patriots. So I found out a great deal about this individual. He was a wonderful athlete. Even at the age of 15, 16, he was almost 6'2", 6'1 and a half, weighed 150, 155 pounds. He was a man at the age of 16, it seems, for those times when you think about 1940. And then, of course, he was engaged in 3 major battles in the Pacific. First of all, Guadalcanal, where he was wounded, then Cape Gloucester, then Peleliu, where he was badly injured. His deltoid muscle was actually separated and torn with shrapnel, but he wound up being a very successful baseball player in the Marine Corps baseball program, going to Hawaii to play in their own national championships, winding up being trailed by the New York Yankees. But by the time 1953 rolled around, you pitch 11-inning game about 2 or 3 years, and you're going to lose your arm. And that's what happened to him. And then he became sick in 54 while I was in Japan, and passed away in 57 at the age of 32.
What, in all of your research for this book, how did it surprise your wife?
Well, what happened was the way I chronologically followed and blended the letters that she had from her dad had sent her mother, even as a 16-year-old, when they were just flirting, I guess you might say. And it was just putting those things in chronological order and then tacking them on to historical events and his military records that placed him in a certain area at a certain time. So that was pretty much the process.
Well, tell me how, if I were to want to go out and pick up a copy of your book, how would I go do it?
Well, number one, right there at the Florence County Library, they have one of my book actually there in the library, and also in Darlington County. And then I'll put on the chat spot the availability of, I don't know if you can see this or not.
We sure can.
Okay. But the best availability is at the Book Baby. I self-published utilizing the Book Baby group out of New Jersey. And that's pretty much where you can find it. Of course, I'm on Facebook, and then of course you can go to Amazon.com and others, Books A Million, and order through them too. But Book Baby is the best place to go.
Okay. What's next for Lieutenant Colonel Grady?
Well, my wife now says I need to write about me. I said, well, I'm not much of, much of a character, but there are a lot of stories that I could tell, and I've got this thing running around in my head, a title that says, "I am who I am because of where I was when," and so I may just put that in print.
What kind of words of wisdom do you want to leave the audience with today?
Words of wisdom. Well, I think this is my first attempt to write, and I think if there are any suspecting authors out there or others, I think you just, investigate, research, put information down wherever you can. If it's on a sticky note or the back of just an envelope where the electric bill comes in, capture information, write it down, hoard it, come back to it. I've got things my father wrote. He's been gone since 1999, but I've got notes he'd written that to me are just overwhelming to read. And so that's kind of what I have in mind.
Great.
Thank you, Richard.
Lieutenant Colonel Weaver, we thank you for your service, and we thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
Our next author is Mr. John Hewitt, and he's been in the publishing industry for more than 40 years. His career highlight, he produced 2 daily newspapers during the Centennial Olympic Games that were held in Atlanta in 1996. He published the Daily Olympian, which was the official newspaper of the Olympics, and the daily Tokyo-based newspaper, Sports Nippon. He's won numerous writing, editing, and photography awards, and the newspaper he publishes in Decatur, Georgia, has been recognized by the Georgia Press Association for the past 13 consecutive years as the first place general excellence newspaper. Thank you, Mr. Hewitt, for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Wonderful,
And
wonderful.
First of all, I've got to say hello to a distant relative that I've yet to meet in person, but I see her name on the screen, Marilyn Trevino. Thank you for joining us. Throughout this entire scenario of research, I've met quite a few family members from the Pee Dee region that I never knew.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Glad you can join us, Marilyn.
Yes, Marilyn, thank you for joining us. Mr. Hewitt, tell us a little bit about the book, Broken Wings, A Brother Left Behind.
The story is about my father, who was born in Florence to a family who had generational ties going back several generations. He was born into a family of great prominence, but due to a series of unfortunate events, when he was 6 years old, he was placed in an orphanage. And he stayed in the orphanage until he was 16, left and lied about his age, and joined the military. He was first in a short enlistment program in and then was later a member of the Provisional Parachute School, the first parachute school the U.S. Army ever operated. And much like the retired Lieutenant Colonel, sorry, a lot of research went into it. But my father ultimately graduated parachute school and then came to my hometown, which is Toccoa, Georgia, home of Band of Brothers and Currahee Mountain.
Oh, yeah.
And he actually trained the men who were immortalized in Band of Brothers. So I did not know this. My parents divorced the first time. No, I think it was the third time, I think, when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I didn't see him again for another 10 years and really didn't know much about the man at all. And when at one of my older brother's funeral, the local historian approached another of my brothers and said, I have recordings of your father that were sent to Tom Hanks. That was the basis of Band of Brothers.
Wow.
And quite frankly, I called immediate BS on it. I'm a cynical journalist. I want proof before I'm going to buy into anything. So I started talking with the historian, and it started becoming evident that there was some validity to what he was saying. And a couple of months later, I met with him, and he gave me a copy of the actual interviews. And that got me interested in the military history. But at that point, I still didn't know anything about my family history in the Pee Dee region. And I met with Brian Gandy at the Darlington History Center, and he provided me untold information about my family. So that was the start of it. And then the more I discovered and the more I saw the going from privilege to orphanage to paratrooper, I thought this story needs to be told. And it was something that was enlightening to most of my family and a lot of our extended family members, because the family kind of dissipated because of the division, and some of them ending up in orphanages. But yeah, that's how it all started. Took 3 years of research and a whole lot of interviewing and asking newly found relatives for stories. And then one of the complications that I ran into, the National Archives had a fire in the 60s, I think, that destroyed the records of military guys who were from the late 30s through the early 40s. And my father's records happened to be part of that. But I started going in Facebook groups in different places and actually found a lot of things that my older brother had documentation and paratrooper certificates, and was able to piece together the story.
Now, what branch of the military was your father?
That was U.S. Army.
It was the U.S. Army? World War II?
World War II started out, well, he never made it. Thus the title of Brother Left Behind.
Gotcha.
He was a graduate of the first parachute school in Fort Benning, Georgia in 1941.
Okay.
There were, I think there were a total of 48 men who were chosen from throughout the country to be part of that provisional class. And they were the ones who ended up then going to train the other paratroopers. It was a new concept for the Army at that time.
Well, tell me the title, Broken Wings, A Brother Left Behind. Where did that inspiration for that particular title come from?
Well, paratroopers highly value and covet those silver wings. So that was the broken wings, because my father ended up being a broken man. And he was left behind 4 days prior to the invasion of Normandy. He was given a discharge and battled seeing all these men he had trained
Yeah.
go off to, in many cases, death and then glory, while he was left behind. That's I mean, it's a very literal title.
What are you working on now?
I'm toying with an idea. I haven't done much with it, but in the research, I found that my family has ties to the Mayflower.
Wow.
The first Hewitt in America was a Captain Thomas Hewitt, who ran a supply boat company between Montreal and the newly established colonies of the US. He ended up marrying the granddaughter of Mayflower passengers, John Alden and Priscilla Mullins, immortalized in The Courtship of Miles Standish by Longfellow. And I've realized that we are part of truly one of the first families of this nation. And then I think it was my sixth great grandfather, Eliphalet, who had fought in several battles, was given a land grant in the 1700s to come to the Pee Dee region to help establish a community there.
Okay.
And actually just south of Florence on Hewitt Cemetery Road, I discovered this too, is the Hewitt family cemetery, with 7, I think, generations of my family buried there. So it's an interesting, I've thought about a factual story based on the research that I've gathered, and obviously a lot of more research would need to be done. But I've thought about trying to develop a storyline around the beginnings of this nation and how we collectively, being the family members, have split apart, who has done what, and how, and bring us up to the current.
Okay. Well, lastly, how can one go and get a copy of your book as well?
The website is brokenwings.us. Hopefully everyone can see that.
We can see it.
And it's also available on Kindle. But I have to make a comment here. Hopefully you guys can see the cover of the book. That is one of the first, well, that is the first group of paratroopers. There were 13 of them in that photo of the US Army. They were wearing football helmets, and they did not have any official uniforms at all. I mean, these guys were basically just told, get out there and jump. And so that's, and then obviously, as I said before, my father ended up training all these guys who were immortalized. So yeah, it's available on Kindle and available on brokenwings.us.
Great. Mr. Hewitt, we also thank you for your contribution as well.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next author is Ms. R.A. Becky Muth. Her love for a good mystery began as a child and only grew with age. She's a coffee addict with no plans to kick her caffeinated habit. I'm right there with you, Becky. I see you. Yep, I'm right there. See, I got mine right here. I'm right there with you. She lives on a sun-drenched South Carolina coast with her husband and their sons. When she isn't writing, R.A., as she's known by, enjoys listening to podcasts with her golden retriever. And she says it's no mystery that she writes romance under the name Becky Muth. Becky, we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful,
And
wonderful.
Thank you for to the library for putting all this together. It's always great to connect with other authors and readers.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your most recent book.
My most recent book was book 3 in the Haunted Housekeeping series. This is book 1. It's called The Squeaky Clean Skeleton. it starts out, it has a sleuth and her best friend. They run a housekeeping business.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, they hate housekeeping, especially scrubbing toilets. So every book is they're trying something else to try to get out of the housekeeping business, and they keep finding dead bodies. So in the first book, they find their client's corpse, the squeaky clean skeleton, in the attic of her house, and there's a stray cat that has appeared. So the main character takes the stray cat home, and as soon as her best friend leaves, the cat is gone, and in his place, in the cat's place, is a 6 foot tall, handsome Irishman. And you find out that he's been cursed to live as a cat. So then, you know, in the books that follow, they have to find a way to break the curse and things like that. So I did not expect it at all. I was writing along, and my publisher is also my boss. I work for the publishing house. And so I asked her, I was like, so the cat just turned into a hot Irishman. Is this a problem? She goes, that's not a problem at all. Keep going, see what happens. So I did, and readers like it. And the audiobook won an Imagined Award at the Imaginarium Conference last year in Louisville, Kentucky.
Tell us a little bit about your writing style.
I always start by plotting a book. You can't see behind me, but there's a dry erase board with a piece of poster board under it, and I call it my murder board. And it has the start of the plot, it has all the suspects, and then it has like means, motive, and opportunity, kind of like a little spreadsheet kind of style, and the sticky notes that move around and things like that. And about 15,000 words, and all of my books are about 45 to 50,000 words. They're pretty short. About a third of the way into the book, the plot goes out the window and the characters take over. So.
How did you get interested in writing in this particular genre?
I always wanted to write a mystery, but then probably in about 2015, I attended BoucherCon, the world's largest mystery conference, and it was in Raleigh, North Carolina that year. And that was probably about the first time I heard the term cozy mystery. And I was like, oh, okay, so like Nancy Drew for grown-ups. Hardy Boys for grown-ups is how it was explained to me. And I did not know I had been reading a lot of cozy mysteries. And I was like, well, this is my jam, you know. And cozy mystery, there's no violence, there's no vulgar language. All the gore is off the page. In fact, when I first wrote this book, there was a scene that described the squeaky clean skeleton before she was squeaky clean. And my best reviewer, she's in the Netherlands, and she came back to me and she said, the scene, I don't know, it gave me nightmares. So on one hand, I was like, oh no, I'm so sorry. I'll take that out. It's not a problem. And on the other hand, I was like, yes, I gave so many nightmares. So.
What are you working on now? What's next for Becky Muth?
What's next is a series called the Magical Beans series. And it stars a character named Zip. She has pink hair. She's my favorite character so far. She's an orphan who lives with her aunt in a place called on Mulberry Mountain, Georgia. And she owns a coffee shop. And in the very first book, one of her clients comes, one of the customers comes in, and you find out it's a land developer who is trying to take the land that the coffee shop sits on. And later they have a meeting later that day, and he texts her and he says, are you ready for this meeting? And she said, in the text, she says, I will do whatever it takes to keep you from taking my land. And when she goes to the meeting, she finds that he's been killed. So now she's a person of interest, and she has to clear her name. The detective, of course, and like most cozies, is very handsome. Her best friend is her ex-boyfriend, or is her high school sweetheart that didn't work out, and he still likes her. So there's a little bit of a love interest. But the main thing is that the dog and cat talk. So, and yeah, and only certain people can hear them. There's a reason why that readers find out later, but the dog is like, he's kind of like a kindergartner in his mindset, and he's very cute, and he's a little pit bull mixed puppy, and everybody loves him. And the cat, I don't know if you guys remember Mr. Belvedere from the 80s, that show.
I sure do.
The cat's kind of like Mr. Belvedere, but he's a lot like He's a lot snarkier. So,
Do all of your books have magical animal characters?
no, actually, one of the first books I wrote was Protecting Peyton, a
Mhm.
romantic suspense, and it also won an Imagine Award for the audiobook version. And this one has a golden retriever that is a search and rescue dog, and the main character is the dog's handler. And when her brother goes missing, the dog helps find the brother. Well, sort of.
What gives Becky Muth the inspiration to write?
I would say anything and everything, but mostly my pets. Like we have 8 feral cats. Like we moved here to South Carolina from West Virginia last December. And we quickly found out that our cat had a feral cat colony in the woods behind our house. They're being taken care of. We have a neighbor who makes sure they stay vetted and altered and everything, but they like sleeping on the sun on my back porch, which is fine with me. I have 3 dogs that are, pretty well indoor dogs. And so when I saw the one cat kept showing up, this big black cat, I'm like, okay, this cat needs to go in a book. And in my head, I'm like having conversations with the cat, like, because I spend a lot of time in my office without humans and, so kind of Dr. Doolittle kind of thing.
If I wanted to go out and get a copy of your book or books, where can I find them?
All of my books are on Amazon, and you can find them on my website, which is beckymuth.com. And here's my information. You see that? And all of my books are also in Kindle Unlimited for the most part.
All right,
So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can just binge right through them.
Is there anything you want to leave the audience with?
If you want to write a book, start writing. Get a journal and just start taking notes, or just, a lot of times if I'm on my, I'm away from my desk, I'll open my phone and I'll start a newsletter draft in Gmail, and just with notes for the book or notes for a future book. So.
All right, great. Well, Becky, we do appreciate your contribution as well, and I wish you nothing but the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Our next author is Mr. Dan Morrow. He's published 2 novels within the last 3 years. His first book was The Secret of Silver Keep, and that was published through Covenant Publishers. His most recent novel, A Heartbeat in Danger, was just released in July of this year. He's new to being a published author, and he continues to look for new ways to raise awareness to his books. Mr. Morrow, we do appreciate you joining us today. Tell us a little bit about your most recent offering.
All right, thank you so much, Richard. I'll tell you what, I want to echo the sentiments as well. Thank the Florence County Library for putting this on. And I want to thank the other authors because, man, I'm learning a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of history, and boy, I just love it. The book itself is about a teenage girl who's facing an unexpected pregnancy. And she's carried in a dream state into the future to see what her child's life may or may not become. And what she sees are glimpses of her child being a doctor or homeless or a lawyer or in prison, and different scenarios that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I write from a very faith-based ideal. I mean, faith is very important to me. My relationship with Christ is important, but I don't proselytize. I don't, that's the one thing I'm not going to do in my writing. I'm not going to push an agenda. So if you read my books, you're going to see hints of religion and faith there, but I'm not going to proselytize to you. And this is a good example because what this book attempts to do is dance that fine line. It says, here's a difficult situation. Here are the hard questions that she has to be asked and answer. But what is she ultimately going to choose? And I leave that up to the reader. I don't tell you what to believe. I don't tell you what she does. You read the book, you base it off of, whatever, and then answer the questions for yourself. And then you go from there. So it was a joy to write the book. It really was. It was a lot of fun.
Tell us about what you had to go through, the steps you had to go through, because you're a male speaking almost from a female's point of view.
Right, right.
Tell
You
us
know,
a
I'll
little
tell you
bit
what,
about that.
what was interesting as I kept writing it, what struck me was this really is about mothers and the strength that mothers carry in life. I mean, obviously, it's important to have, you know, two people to support a child. It's the ideal situation. Everybody dreams of that. I know through circumstances and things like that, you know, things go on and stuff happens, and you know, we can all overcome what goes on. But I think to me, the most important message was that motherhood is important. It's intrinsic to, you know, there's several instances where the main character, her name is Stacy, she sees her child hurting and she wants to run to her and hug her and tell her it's going to be okay. Or she's beaming with pride at what her child has accomplished. And it's those moments of she's overwhelmed by this, but at the same time, she's dealing with this attitude of, but if I go through with this, it's going to ruin my life. I have goals and dreams of my own. And if I do this, it's going to ruin my life. So there's that conundrum and that conflict of what is she going to do and decide and what's best. And that's why I said, I don't tell you what to believe about that. So, but it's really just, it was difficult at times, but I think having my mother as a role model for me and tapping into what I remember about how she raised me, that kind of helped to formulate that perspective.
If you had to put down three things that you want a reader to take away from your book, your most recent offering, what would it be?
For this one specifically, I want you to be challenged. I want you to really think about what you believe and analyze it. I want you to understand this is the most difficult situation a girl can face, because you multiply this times 1,000. I know how many girls. I mean, it's literally this issue literally affects all of us. So you know how it affects the person, how difficult that situation is, and then the third one might be just the fact that if you see somebody that needs help. In fact, the book is kind of based on a real situation. I had a conversation with my daughter's best friend. We call her our chosen daughter because we've known her for so long. She was in the car and she was facing the same situation. She was pregnant. She had no idea what she was going to do. Her boyfriend wasn't around. You know, her parents had been divorced for a long time. And I didn't know exactly what to tell her. So I did my best to help. But it kind of marinated for a while. And like I said, multiply that times thousands and thousands of other situations and decisions. And it just struck me that, you know, here's this person who's facing such a hard thing. And how is she going to get out of this with support, and with love, and with kindness? And I've got to give a shout out there because ultimately she's got 3 great kids, and we're proud to be part of her family and part of raising those kids. So it ultimately ended up well for her. But like I said, I know that there's, you know, look, there's choices that everybody makes. There's decisions we all choose, and ultimately there are consequences to those circumstances.
Absolutely.
So you just got to make the best of it.
Is there a hidden message that you've tried to get those young men who tend to abandon these young ladies? Is there a particular message that you're trying to reach them as well, to try to lessen the issue of single parenthood?
I think it's a matter of asking those questions and asking, you know, because in her dream state, she meets this person I call the being. And he's the one who's continually asking her these questions. And I think through those questions themselves, she has to analyze, okay, I made this choice, I made this decision to be pregnant, or, you know, by accident it happened. So now what am I going to do? You know, I don't have a boyfriend, and what am I going to do? And ideally this would be great. And where do I go from here? So ideally, like I said, the ideal circumstance we all think about is, you know, 2 people in a home raising the kids. Like I said, I know there's different circumstances that affect that, and God bless it for people overcoming that. As far as for men, I don't know that there's a hidden message behind it. I think really it's just a matter of looking at this and realizing the damage that you can do if you just leave. And if you just up and say, you know, forget it, I don't want to have a part of it, and they're gone, it affects more people than you realize.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Dan, what's next for you?
Right now, I tell you what, I'm working on a project for someone else. Actually, I'm writing the story for them, and kind of as a ghostwriter. So it's a new situation for me. As far as ideas for myself personally, I have probably 7, 8, 10 different stories in different stages of completion. And I've got about 15 Word document pages of ideas that I haven't even touched yet. So there's no shortage of ideas that I get to write about. So it's just a matter of trying to find time to do that. So, but yeah, I'm excited about what's going to happen. I'm excited about what's going to come out of this project and see where this goes.
And how can one go out and procure a copy of your book?
For the book, you can get it on the normal channels, Amazon, Barnes Noble, Books A Million, iTunes. I know it's also available as an ebook, so you can look that up. You can actually reach me, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this very well or not, but I'm going to try. You can find me on Facebook, Author Dan Morrow. You can see me at Instagram at Dan Morrow, Author Dan Morrow. I'm also on LinkedIn, Daniel Morrow there. So if you'd like to connect, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to meet you.
Did you actually put it in the chat, Mr. Morrow?
I did. I put where you can find the book. Yes.
All right, great, great. Mr. Morrow, we thank you for your contribution and thank you for being with us today.
Appreciate that.
All right. Our next author is Miss Cynthia Ford. She's also known as Cynthia O. She's a native of South Carolina, and she is the author of Free as an Uncaged Bird and Dream Like a Queen. She wears multiple hats to include serving in the Air Force, working with At Youth Risk, and she's the founder of Beyond Empowerment and CEO of Cynthia O. She's an author, she's a speaker, she's a professional writer. Cynthia O is established as a distinctive and magnetic connection with multiple audiences. Cynthia O gracefully layers the atmosphere with a thought-provoking and transformative experience. She was recently featured in Diversity Works magazine and VIP magazine, and she was named as a local Remarkable Woman winner in 2020 by Channel 13 News, which is WPTW. And she's also received an award for Women of Distinction or Woman of Distinction. And I think before we started, I found out she also is an author of children's books as well. So Miss Cynthia O, I want to welcome you and just tell me what has inspired you to write your most recent book.
My most recent book is Dream Like a Queen, and I hold it up here so everyone can see it. And I was inspired to write it after participating in a speaking engagement for young women. And the title of the event that I did for them was Dream Like a Queen. So I wanted to take it a step further and just encourage young people to pursue the dreams that they have.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about the book.
It takes the readers on a journey, and during the journey, they are also building a castle as they're building upon their dreams. But they're also giving 5 different tips that they are supposed to remember. So one is never stop dreaming. Another one is keep your cup full. The third one is always wear your crown. The fourth one is rule in excellence. And the fifth one is write it down and make it happen.
Wonderful. What any particular demographic you really want to touch with your most recent book?
With my most recent book, it reaches to young ladies. And I know that I had to give a particular age range as I published the book, but it actually can reach teenagers as well. And some adults have enjoyed it.
How long have you been writing?
I've actually been writing since I've been a little girl. I recently found diaries that I had as a child. I found writings that I had in middle school, high school, and of course I have kept writings from college. So writing has always been my safe haven.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about your writing style.
I think I have a multifaceted writing style. I write all the time. I have stacks of journals, and so different types of journals for different things. And I like to write when it's quiet. I either write early in the morning or in the evening. And so I think on a lot of things. I'm a thinker. I'm a dreamer and a thinker. So if a thought comes to me, I'll either put it in my phone or either I'll write it down in my journal and I'll expand upon those thoughts.
How many books have you written? so far?
Dream Like a Queen is my second book. My first book is Free as an Uncaged Bird.
Okay.
Mhm.
And what about any of the children's books that we learned a little bit earlier?
That is Dream Like a Queen is the only children's book that I have written so far.
Okay. Okay. Great. 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 Well, what inspires you to just sit down and just go ahead and dedicate the time to write?
Yeah, I think that is a platform for speaking to people. And previously, at a young age, a lot of people would say, "Oh, she's quiet, she's shy." Again, writing was my avenue. That was my safe haven, my zone. And so it was my way of speaking what I had to say to people. And becoming a published author has allowed me to reach multiple genres of people, multiple audiences. And so that's my way of speaking.
How do you tell me a little bit about how do you go about your process of creating a book from start to finish?
Okay, so for me, it depends on what I feel is needed during that particular time. So with my first book, when I published that, I thought, okay, this is what is needed. And with Dream Like a Queen, I was encouraged by one of my sorority sisters to say, well, you should pursue writing books for children, which that was my original thought anyway, to write for children. But I took it a step further and published that book, but I felt that was needed. And for the books to come, it will be what I feel is needed during that particular time.
What in your books, what viewpoint? I mean, where are you coming? Are you writing it in real time, like current events, things that are happening right now that inspire you? Or are you looking back, or are you looking at the future?
It actually is in real time. So with Dream Like a Queen, the readers will feel like they're a part of the journey. So they're reading, it's actually a rhyming book, and they're going along through the process. And so my writing style for the first two books is a process, allowing the readers to take a journey. So by the end of the book, you should be in a different place than where you were in the beginning of the book. Even at a level of a child, you can still take that journey. And people who are older, you can still take that journey. And I do feel that people, as long as you are alive, you still have purpose in you. So be purposeful and taking the next step in your life.
When you say in a different place, you want your readers to be in a different place at the end than when they started. Elaborate on that a little bit more.
And when I say that, I mean mentally. So the state of mind of where you are, being in a different place mentally. So you've learned something through reading this book from the beginning to the end. You've built something within yourself that you didn't have before you first opened the book.
What's next for Cynthia O?
What's next? So for me, I'm going to do a male version of this book. So there will be a male version. And I will also have a book called Leap that will be released in the spring. Following that, there will be a book for teenagers. And then following that, my novel, Love Three Ways, will be released.
You're going to be quite busy for over the next year or so.
Yes.
What has this pandemic done to creativity, to you finding the time or the will to write or the motivation to write?
Right. I actually had planned to travel with the first book prior to the pandemic. And of course that didn't happen, but the pandemic had allowed me to write more. It created a space for me that I probably wouldn't have had. It allowed me to expand virtually and to connect with people that I probably would not have connected with as quick as I did.
How can I go about getting a copy of your works?
My work is available on my website, www.cynthia-o.com. It's also available on Amazon and Ingram Sparks.
All right, wonderful. How about any type of social media?
I do have a social media platform. So I have a Facebook account. You probably can't see it because it's blurry, but I have on Facebook, it's Cynthia O. On Instagram is The Real Cynthia O, and on LinkedIn is Cynthia Ford.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. Any last bit of advice you want to give our listeners today?
I would say make the most of your time while you can. I do say that often, but you know, I say that time is one of the most valuable resources that we are given. And so take the time while you have it to explore anything that you want to do. Be passionate about it while you have time, go get it so that you will have no regrets later on. You can be young or old, but again, you still have purpose in you. It is up to you to fulfill that purpose. And once you fulfill that purpose, keep going and keep fulfilling more things.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Ford. Thank you for your offerings. Thank you for just being with us and sharing with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Our next author is Miss Georgia Gates. Miss Georgia Gates is a former school teacher and information system specialist who has lived in states from one end of the United States to the other. After retiring, she and her husband chose to settle in South Carolina, lured by warm weather, family, and the friendly atmosphere of the state. Georgia enjoys writing, reading, crafting, and visiting with her children and grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Miss Georgia Gates. Welcome, Georgia. I think you're on mute. I think she might be frozen. What we'll do then in that case, oh, there you go. You're moving now. I think you were frozen there, Ms. Gates. Can you go ahead and unmute? There you go.
I live in the country. My internet access is iffy sometimes.
Wonderful.
I've been writing.
Go ahead, Ms. Gates.
Well, I was going to say I've been writing since I was in middle school and high school, and I started writing very bad poetry. But when I was laid up with knee replacement surgery, I read a lot, and I decided that I couldn't find the right books to read. I like cozy mysteries. So I thought I'd try writing a mystery. And one of my favorites was the British mystery novels. So I looked at it and I thought, well, what about those novels do I like? Interesting characters, quirky characters, interesting the English countryside, quaint villages. So I looked around South Carolina and I thought, well, the area around Beaufort with the water, interesting historic downtown areas was something that appealed to me. And I thought, well, that makes a good setting for a story. So I created a town. I said,
did we lose her?
the main character of the story is an older woman and a retired computer person. And in the town of Beaufort, I created an artistic background because I used to teach art. And then that was my general inspiration. And then for specific stories, I've written 7 in the series so far. I got ideas from the news, from family members. I have a son-in-law who likes bourbon. He told me about an actual incident. So I did research. Some of it was difficult because I don't drink a lot, but I did a lot of reading and created a story based on that actual incident. In my hunting mystery, that was based on a real crime that happened in another state. the crime was not solved, so I had to solve it myself or figure out how it would have happened. Probably changed a lot of things to protect the guilty. But I really enjoyed the thought process. When you talk about plotting, and there's, I guess, two theories, plotting a story out and pantsing. I did something similar to Becky. I started out with the idea of what the crime would be and general plot outlines, but I found once it got into the story, the characters kind of got a voice of their own. And the plot kind of took turns that just on its own. And then I kind of have to resolve things at the end and make sure I've hit all my clues. I also like to inject humor in my stories, even though these are mystery stories. And some of my friends who've read my swamp mysteries, some of the swamp scenes with the body in the swamp and everything is a little grisly. I try to inject humor in there too, because I think, you know, when different times are difficult, you've got to keep your sense of humor. As far as I guess where I want to go from here, I just finished up my Flower Moon mystery. And as an aside, the inspiration came from part of the Flower Moon mystery was a friend who's been in the military was telling us about his love of ordnance, I guess, or ballistic. He liked to blow things up. And so I had my friend and her husband come over, and the husband gave us a long talk on blowing things up. So in my Flower Moon mystery, I decided that I needed some explosions. And after writing the first one, I thought, gee, that was lots of fun to write about it. I think I'll have to put in a second explosion. So that kind of took my story plan and changed it in a whole new direction. As far as where I'm going, I just finished doing ghostwriting, a piece about a local artist. I did some ghostwriting with another author friend. And after that, I'm about halfway through my 8th book. I hope to get that done. Right now I'm calling it Peppermint Mocha, but if I don't get it done before Christmas, I may have to change it. Maybe What's an Easter Drink? Originally, when I first started, it was Pumpkin Spice Mystery, but you know, I guess I'm getting slow getting things finished. As far as advice to other people, especially other authors, writing every day is important. We have 2 writing groups too, and I think that's important to encourage people. The South Carolina Writers Association is a wonderful resource, and we meet locally at coffee shops. We hit all the coffee shops in town. And then there's also the Flow Writers group that I belong to. And that is one of the reasons that I was able to get my first book finished. Belonged to Flow Writers. We met every couple of weeks and we'd share our writing. So it kind of pushed me to get my first book done. And they were inspiration and encouragement, which is very important when you're starting out, especially. With COVID, one of the things that I've tried to do to keep our Flow Writers group together, we Zoom a couple times a month. And every Sunday I send out prompts, an email with writing prompts. Another thing that I'd like to encourage anybody who's writing, especially people who are starting out with their first novel, publishers suggest newsletters. And I send out a newsletter every 6 weeks, probably. In addition to little short story excerpts and events we're doing, I do recipes because in my Baker Street Bistro, I talk about food a lot. I don't put the actual recipes in the book, but I do publish them in my newsletter. As far as contact information too,
go. I think, have you guys can't hear it either? Yeah. I think we lost her. Yep, we did. We did. All right, there we go. All right, thank you, Miss Gates. We do appreciate you. We appreciate what you've done here today. We appreciate the information that you shared, and we do appreciate the books that you've written. Again, where can we find your books?
All my books are available on Amazon and Kindle.
On Amazon and Kindle, great.
Yeah, my website has links to the actual spots on Amazon.
And give me that website again, because when you were presenting it, it went out. Your audio went out.
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can pull it up. Baker Street Bistro Mysteries.com.
Baker Street Bistro Mysteries.com.
That's right.
Great. If you can put that in the chat as well, so our audience can gain access.
Okay, I will.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Our next author is Miss Camille Sabag. I got it. Okay. Cammie Michaels always dreamed of traveling to magical lands and faraway places, and as a teenager wanted to be an astronaut. After a successful career at Conway Medical Center as an obstetrician gynecologist for children and 6 grandchildren, Cammie has found a new passion in writing science fiction and fantasy romance. Her first novel, I Am Shefro, an alien love story, book 1 of the Shefro trilogy, was published in July 2020 and has received numerous 5-star reviews on Amazon. She was born in Montreal, and she's been living in Myrtle Beach for 25 years and loves traveling, spending time with her family, and nature photography. Cammie, we do appreciate you joining us. Tell us a little bit about your books.
Thank you very much for
especially your
having
most recent one.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the Florence County Library for giving me the opportunity to join you guys. I Am Shefru is the first in a trilogy. And I'm currently working on book 2 called Betrayal, which includes the same characters, but in a different setting. It's more of a thriller. The first book is a sci-fi fantasy romance for adults, have to mention that. And I had a lot of fun writing that. I've been interested in astronomy and sci-fi since I was very young. I followed the Gemini missions and Apollo missions and read a lot about astronomy until I realized that all the worlds that we see in astronomy are so far, we may never reach them, or at least not in my lifetime. So I decided that the best way to join them was to write a story about a woman who falls in a wormhole and winds up in a completely different world where she meets a Shefru. And the Shefru is the very intriguing alien that is part of a group that has 3 genders. And that's why the cover, I don't know if you see it well, but there's the Shefru and there's the other 2 on each side, which represent the other 2 genders. So it's a completely different society. And I like surprises. I like something that you don't expect. When I was a child, my most favorite book was Alice in Wonderland. And the Shefru is a little bit like the series The Outlander. And I've had a comment on Amazon with that, a review that said, this is like Outlander, but way better. So I said, oh, great. I love that. Um, I was not writing until a few years ago. I started writing about 10 years ago. As my career as a obstetrician gynecologist was winding down. My kids, I have 4 children, have left and got married. So suddenly I found myself with a lot more time on my hands. And I said, oh, this is my time to write. And so this is my second career now that I've retired, and I love it.
How did you come up with the story of your most recent work?
I think it was something that I thought about actually very young. And I think that it's important sometimes to open your horizons, to think of something out of the box. I'm a very much out of the box kind of person. And the Chef Roux is a story also about an alien species who lost their world following climate changes and had to move to another planet. And sometimes we forget that there are very, if any, planets like Earth in the universe. And if there are, they're very far away. It's not like you can suddenly jump and find one. And that it's a little bit of a reminder also that we have to take care of the planet that we have. There's no other like Earth. And you'll never find animals anywhere else in the whole universe like the ones we have on Earth. So it's a little bit of a reminder of that also.
As the story
So
began,
kind of incorporate that
Yeah.
in the story.
great. As the story began to unwind, what surprised you most?
I think that when you first start writing, you don't expect your characters to take a life of their own and kind of evolve. And the story doesn't always go where you think it's going to go, but it kind of follows your mindset and your feeling about things. So that's how it goes. And now I'm working on Betrayal, and I was influenced in my second book by the pandemic. And that has a certain influence in the second book, which is going to be released in March 2022.
What provides Cammie the inspiration to write?
You know, when I write, I forget everything about the problems of the world we live in. I find myself in another universe. I love it. I can go and write on my desk for hours and the time flies by. I don't even know that I'm there. It's like I'm in another world and I'm enjoying it.
How do you go about getting in that zone?
Oh, it's easy. I just read the things I wrote the day before, and poof, I'm in the story, and I just keep going. And I connect this to events that we have on every day, you know, floods and cataclysm and different things that happen on Earth. Basically, we have something in the news every day, and you can incorporate some of that in the story.
And you mentioned a second ago something that you're working on now. When do you expect that to be published? And what is the title again?
March 2022, this coming March.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Betrayal. And that'll be the second book of the trilogy. The third one, well, probably in a couple of years. I haven't really started. I have all my ideas. I'm kind of a pantser. I'm not a planner. Because if I start the plan, it never goes the way I think. So I forget the whole plan and I say, well, let's start with what I want to do and we go from there.
Wonderful. Where can I find your books?
Well, my books are locally, actually, in Myrtle Beach, because I'm from Myrtle Beach, at the Mole Hole, which is a local store that encourages local crafts and also writers, and also naturally on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, etc. So they're all available easily, and you can find them. I have my little card with my website. I don't know if you'll see it. It's I didn't realize it shows upside down or something, but you can go on CamiMichaels.com, or my website has all the information.
Wonderful, wonderful. Cami, we do appreciate you being with us today and sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you so very much. Our last author is Mr. A.F. Winter. He wants us to know, he provided us this bio. He's a poet, he's a playwright, and he's a novelist. He taught at Coker University for 13 years. He is an artistic director of Puck's Theater for 10 years. And Puck's Theater created new experimental work and brought the arts to at-risk populations, including halfway houses, orphanages, and community centers. He lives in the Low Country as well with his Cocker Spaniel, Millie. Mr. Winter, we do appreciate you joining us today. Tell us a little bit about man in the pandemic.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moses, for being, kind of interviewing all of us. And I want to thank Florence County Library System also for doing this as well. Man in the Pandemic. It's my most recent novel. It was published in September. It tells the story of Frank Smith, an accountant who is told to work from home in the first few weeks of the pandemic and eventually is let go completely. He spends his time isolating in self-isolation, trying to keep himself sane. So he has no family there. He's estranged from his kids, divorced. So he's basically all by himself. And he kind of walks from his living room to his kitchen, to the dining room, to the hallway. And he does this little circle about 1,000 times a day. And as he's walking, he thinks of his life, he thinks of the situation in the world, and he lets his mind go. But basically, it's trying to keep himself grounded.
Mm-hmm.
He fails miserably a lot of the times. He battles with an evil dragonfly, which finds its way into his home. The heroic battle that ensues dang near kills him. He also suffers from great anxiety when a small lizard crawls under his stove, and he spends many sleepless nights wondering when the terrible beast will attack him.
Mm-hmm.
There's also an amusing incident when Smith finds a box full of Halloween costumes and puts on a clown outfit, and as soon as he puts on the wig and makeup, there's a knock on the door, and there's a solar panel salesman there, and let me tell you, hijinks ensue. So there's a lot of weird things, but in the last couple of years, we have gone through a lot of weird things. So.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your writing style.
Well, I do kind of write in a bunch of different forms. And usually the voices come to me, and I follow the form that they tell me, from really short poems of just a few words to some novels that go 150,000 words. So it really is what comes to me.
Are there any authors out there that you gain your inspiration from?
Well, I do like reading about writing. So Stephen King, what Cami just said with the reading a few pages before and then you continue, Stephen King does that all the time. He takes like the last 3 pages and then he goes from there. very influenced by what Hemingway said in his stuff. I read a lot of kind of stuff. It's all over the place. And I think my writing is influenced by a lot of different people as well.
How did you come about getting interested in writing in that particular genre?
It is semi-autobiographical, this. I am a middle school teacher, and we got released in March of, I guess, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And I did spend a lot of time just walking around. At the beginning of the book, it actually thanks Millie, my dog, because without her, it would probably be a work of nonfiction instead of fiction.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Tell me about your process from concept to idea to pen and paper.
Well, a lot of my fellow authors here talked about plotting versus pantsing. I am a real pantser. I decide I'm going to write, and I go and sit in a coffee shop or someplace public, and I sit down, open the computer, and I read the last couple of pages, and then I just let the thing happen. I'm always surprised by my characters. All this writing has saved me quite a large amount of money in therapy. So they do get strange, and I kind of let them dance around over there.
So you use that as your self-care?
I do use that as my self-care. And let me tell you, Richard, I need a lot of self-care.
We all do. I do too. I do too. Thank you. What are you working on now?
Well, I am writing a very weird book called Mr. Albert, and Mr. Albert is dead. He's not a ghost, he's not a vampire, he's not a zombie. He is just walking around just like the rest of us, except he has no bodily functions whatsoever. But he does have lots of conversations with us. And one of the lines in it is something like, well, how could you speak without having any brain functions? And Mr. Albert says, it seems like there's a lot of people nowadays that are in the same state as me. But anyway, he is a nihilist. So he doesn't believe in anything, God, country, love, and he is dead. And one night he saves someone from committing suicide who has quite a strong faith. And the person believes that God sent Mr. Albert to save him. And he's trying to prove to Mr. Albert that he has a purpose in life. Mm-hmm. So it's this weird kind of two-person thing, and they go on little adventures together. One has strong faith in God and purpose, and one person doesn't. And the conversations they have about the meaning of life, and does life have meaning, or what should life mean? There's a lot of areas to explore, and they just kind of make me laugh at every moment of this. So,
and when can we expect that?
Oh, who knows? I have no idea. I have I just kind of looked at my list. I have 3 novels that I've already written and 2 books of poetry that are just waiting to be edited. But I will probably finish Mr. Albert, over the summer, I would think. Okay. And then I'll start working on getting that out. But I usually self-publish 1 book a year, whether it's a poetry or a book of plays or novels or novellas.
Where can we pick up a copy of Man in the Pandemic now?
Well, if you're in Somerville, where I'm from, you should go to Main Street Reads, but I have.
Slide it over just a little bit. There you go.
Oh, no,
Right there.
I can't see. Ah.
There you go.
All right.
www.afwinter.com
Yep.
and afwinter2011@gmail.com.
Yes, or you could get it from Amazon. You could request it from all your bookstores because it's published through Ingram Sparks. So, you know, any real bookstore can stock it if they want.
Well, great. We appreciate you. I got one last question, and what we're going to do, we're going to do a brief round robin. And what I want to ask for any aspiring artists that we have that were viewing us today that or will view the taped version of this, what advice would you give any aspiring authors? What advice? Go ahead, Becky.
Join a writing group because they're going to give you support. They're going to give you advice that if they're already published, you can help. They can share what they did that was a mistake that maybe could help save you some time. There could be other people who have marketing experience. I work for an author marketing company, and that's one of my favorite things to do is to talk marketing. So just join a writing group. And if you, the first writing group I joined was the wrong writing group, and it took me too long to notice. So if your writing group, if you're getting a lot of negativity and a lot of what seems more like criticism than critique, move on, because you don't need that negativity.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else?
I second.
Go ahead, Cammie.
I second that. That was my advice also. Join a writing group. And especially if you have a writing group that has people who write different genre and who are at different time in their writing career or story. Some are just beginners and some are more experienced. So you can get feedback from both. And it's important to have positive feedback, not just negative feedback. And at the same time, to have encouragement and advice about, for example, helpful software and where to go for different information. Because when you start, you don't know anything, especially me. You know, I'm French Canadian, and the writing in English was quite different. It's not the same type of writing. And at first, I really needed that advice from my fellow writers.
Thank you, Cammie. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just don't quit. No matter how discouraged you feel, no matter how frustrating things might get, and it will, just don't quit. Just keep going, keep plugging away. Get connected. That's just like everybody else is saying, is get connected. It's key to have someone in your corner to say, you know, I'm going to make sure you don't give up. You know, I've got some good friends of mine who basically threaten my life that if I ever decide to give up writing, that it's not going to be a pretty ending. So, but yeah, it just don't give up and write about what you love. Write about something that you know.
Absolutely.
Feel confident in that arena. Because, you know, like with me specifically, I write from a faith-based perspective, but I'm not going to preach at you. I'm not going to proselytize it or expect you to believe like I do. But it's what I know and it's what I feel comfortable with. There's a lot of questions within that realm that demand answers, and maybe there are no answers. I don't know, but it's worth asking. So yeah, write about what you know and stay within that lane.
Great. Anybody else want to share? Go ahead, Miss Georgia.
I think you need to write every day, even if it's just a little bit. And another trick is to find an environment that's comfortable. I've got an office. I prefer writing at the kitchen table in the morning with the sun coming through. But I try to sit down and write just a little bit every day, even if it's crap. You know, it's a habit forming thing, and eventually you get so that you need to think about it as a job if you really want to get like a novel done. But that's my advice. Find a good environment to be creative.
All right, Mr. Winter.
Hey, Hemingway said that you write for two people. You write for yourself to try to make it as good as possible. And I mean, the stories have to come from a need for you, but you also write for someone that you love, whether they read it or not, or whether they're alive or not. So having that person that you are writing for will get you through all those negative little comments that might, knock you off track. It's kind of having faith in yourself and knowing that you want to get your image out to the world.
Wonderful, wonderful. Anybody else?
I would say, as you continue to write, make sure to continue to read books that are written by other authors. Just continue to feed yourself with other continuous knowledge.
I think somebody in the chat said find a comfortable place. And I think she's putting what you guys are saying in the chat. Okay, Miss Rebecca, thank you for that, Cynthia.
Yeah, I echo every one of those things. I think really holding both the sort of a vision of, I imagined people reading this story about Robert Smalls because I thought it was that important, and imagining the reality of that was kind of the carrot hanging way out in the distance. And I think having sort of short or achievable goals along the way to that are really helpful. A number of words per day or that sort of thing. And the other thing for me was to just keep the questions and the curiosity in the front, and chase every question, even if they kind of lead to a dead end or lead to 17 more rabbit trails, because that's where the stories are, or the inspiration is, or the images, or the language, or all those things that come together to create the story that we believe in.
Wonderful. Go ahead, Mr. Hewitt.
I've got one piece of advice and a little funny story to share with all of you. My advice would be to have the confidence in your own work that you continue what you set out to do. I have an older sister who is an avid reader and highly educated and very critical of us newspaper people because we're, not as I can't even come up with the word. We're not worthy of the book publishing world. And I had asked her for some input when I was about halfway through the book, and I was at a certain place where I didn't have historical information to back up the story, and asked her to get creative because she's written a couple of books and is a very creative person. And probably 5 or 6 weeks later, I receive in the mail, because this sister is elderly and she doesn't do email and she doesn't type. I received a packet probably this thick where she had literally handwritten, rewritten everything that I had written and thought that I should redo it the way she was suggesting. So the point is, have confidence in your work. Put it out there. You're the only one. You're going to be the final judge of it. And if it sells, great. If not, you've done what you set out to do.
Great advice. Mr. Landis and Mr. Grady.
Yeah, I just have to reiterate maybe what I had said earlier, was that investigate, research, and then put it down, whether it be on a legal pad or, of course, the new people like Cynthia and all now, they're using their little iPads and all those good things. Us older folks, we have to write it down and burn it on the brain. But it is just investigate, research, and put it in print somewhere, even if it's just to hold it for the future.
Great. William, are you there? You wanted some parting words to those aspiring artists out there? I'm sorry, authors. But you are artists. What you put down, you just do it in a different way.
Real quick, I echo everything Grady said about, and everybody else said about researching. And if you don't, it will show up in your reviews. I had a review of one of my books that said, it looked like she took a copy of a list of what's in Maine and just tried to stuff it all into her book here and there. And that was exactly what I'd done. And that reader totally called me out on it, and as they should. So.
Okay. Well, with that, I want to personally thank you guys for joining us and just allowing me to spend this time with you this afternoon. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn it back over to those great folks from the Florence County Library.
Okay. This is Linda, and I don't see my picture.
You're on there, Linda.
Okay, all right. I just want to thank you for coming today, for attending Florence County Library's virtual author expo, sponsored by the Friends of the Florence County Library. We thank our authors for participating and sharing their books, writing process, and stories with us. We especially thank Richard Moses from SC Thrive for being our moderator. And we want to encourage all of you to keep writing and sharing your stories. And just as a reminder, the event has been recorded and it will be posted on the library's webpage, florencelibrary.org, at a later time once we get it all together. But we just want to thank you all. We've enjoyed your stories very much. We've learned from your stories, and hopefully we can take some of the tips and encourage ourselves to be writers. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Moses.
Thank you.
And thank you guys.
Richard, you did a great job. Authors, you did a great job.
Thank you. It
Thank
was a
you.
lot of fun.
Thank you.
Great.
You guys have a great one.
Thank
You as well.
Well.
All right.